Assalamualaikum and very good day. Welcome to the fourth video under the series of item analysis. And in this video, I'm going to show you how can we calculate the difficulty indices. So what you need is just one calculator and of course your wit and also the wisdom to interpret the indices. Okay, so without further ado, let's get cracking. So first, what I'm going to do is we are going to look at the exercise as well as the data set that we are going to calculate and turn into indices. All right, let me just make myself occupying the entire space here. Okay, so let's have a look at this data set. So this data set is based on a test taken by 8 students, and the name of the students are indicated here, from Bob, Julie, Tolly, up until Vasily and Kate. Okay, and the students have been arranged according to descending order from the top ranking students to the lowest ranking students, okay, based on the scores from 100 to 20. So Bob is the highest scoring student in the class, while Kate is the lowest scoring student in the class for that particular test. Okay, so have a look at this table. This is exactly the same manner uh, on how you are required to record your data for the assignment. Okay, so what you need to do is to have a number of columns similar to this one. The first column should be the list of the students. You can use pseudonyms or fake names. We don't really need to know the students individually. So you can label them according to whatever names that you want to put, or you can even put in numbers or sort of like ID, for example. It's fine, right? And the second column are the scores obtained by these students based on your test administration process. And then the following columns would be all the objective items that you have tested out in your test administration. Okay, so for example, you have two sections. So start with section A, and then you list down all of the items, and then only you start with section B and list down all of the items. All right. So for this particular task, it only has 10 objective items. The next step that you need to be mindful of is that when you are recording the student scores in this data set, one should be included if the student answered the item correctly, and 0 is an indication that students have not answered the question correctly. Okay, so you have to look by each student, and then also you have to record based on each item for that particular student. So this is the manner you will be coding the students' responses: 1 for getting the answer correctly, and 0 for getting the answer incorrectly for that particular item. Okay, so now that we have done this, then only we can proceed with calculating item difficulty indices. All right, so with regard to item difficulty indices, remember that you have to calculate the index for each item. If you have 40 multiple choice questions, I'm sorry, baby, you have to calculate 40 times, one for each item. Okay, so let's start calculating our item difficulty index. Still remember what the formula is, so let me just make sure that my whiteboard gets in the tile nicely. Okay, so the formula for item difficulty index is item difficulty index for item 1, for example, is total number of students who answered item 1 correctly divided by total number of students who sit for the test. Okay, so let's do item 1 together. So when you calculate item difficulty index, we are calculating by item. So you should not be calculating vertically. Sorry, you should not be calculating based on horizontal data. What you should be looking at is by item. You need to go vertical. All right. So let's do item 1. So item difficulty index for item 1. Total number of students who sit for the test. There are 8 students. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 is the value that remains constant throughout the calculation for all item index for this data set. Okay. The one that changes is the number of students who answer each item correctly. Okay. So for item 1, how many students have managed to answer item 1 correctly? So you just need to include those with the code 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 divided by 8 is 0.625. Okay, so this is the item difficulty index for item 1. To make your life easier and less miserable, okay, um, just keep it up to 2 decimal points. So 0.63. It will be making our process of answering the items below much easier. All right. So the item difficulty index for item 1 is 0.63. Okay. So my dear students, let's take 10 minutes for you to complete the calculation of item difficulty indices for all the remaining items. And then we will discuss what do these indices mean, and then we will attempt to answer all of these questions. All right, 10 minutes, all the best. All right, time's up. Are you guys done with calculating the item? Have you managed to get the difficulty indices for all the remaining 9 items? So let's check whether your answers are similar to mine. So these are the item difficulty indices for all the 10 items. And let me just do the second one in case some of you might get some of the items here incorrectly in terms of difficulty index. Or maybe you are still confused. So this will be able to sort of like make your own um, calculation correct. I don't even know what I'm talking. Okay. All right. So item difficulty index for item 2 is still is the same formula, of course, total number of students who answer item 2 correctly divided by total number of students. So this is the value that should remain the same throughout the calculation because we have the same number of students sitting for the test, of course. Okay, so 8 students. And how many students answered item 2 correctly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So the answer is 0.75. Okay, that's for number 2. This is pretty easy. I'm sure you have no problem completing this calculation. Okay, so calculating is only the first layer of the assignment. The second layer is to know and interpret what's the meaning of these indices. Okay, let's look at this index. What do you think? Does the test consist of more number of easier items or more number of difficult items? Okay, what's the index for difficult items and what's the index of easy items? Okay, very interesting. All right, so let's answer the following questions. These are also the same items that you will be answering for your assignment, uh, for the focus assignment 1. All right. If you still remember, the cutoff point of item difficulty index between easy items, difficult items, and moderate uh, level of difficulty items. So this is too long. So make it shorter so that it can be covered by my camera, my webcam. Okay. So item difficulty indices range from 0 to 1. 0 means the item is too difficult, and 1 means the item is too easy. So you'll get 0 if nobody in the class answered the item correctly, and you get 1 if everybody in the class answered the item correctly. And with item difficulty indices, you can convert the percentage directly from the index. You get 0 because nobody answered correctly, and you get 1 because 100% of the students all answered the item correctly. And 0.5 means that the item is of moderate level of difficulty. All right, so the cutoff point is 0.25 to 0.75 are considered items that are of moderate difficulty level. 0.25 to 0 are items that are considered difficult, and 0.75 to 1 are items that we consider as easy. Now, with that knowledge in mind, let's answer this question. Item 1. Which item was the easiest? Let us look at our item difficulty table. Okay. In order to find the easiest item, all you need to do is to find item that has 1. Okay. All right. All you need to do is to find item that has 1 as its difficulty index, or index that is the closest to 1. Right? So that will be the most easy item in the test. So with regard to this data set, we do have a number of items with similar index of difficulty, and they are the easiest item in the test. Item with 0.88 are items that are the easiest in the test. So we have item 3, item 6, only 2 items. Okay, so how do we answer these particular questions? Remember, I mentioned that when you are answering these questions, don't forget to include 3 information. Okay, then only your answer is complete. So you need to mention what item or which item, state the item number, what's the index of difficulty, and the third aspect is to interpret the meaning of the index. Okay, so the easiest item in the task is item 3 and or items 3 and 6. Okay, so that's stating the item number with the difficulty index of 0.88. The items are the easiest in the test because 88% of students in the group answered the item correctly. Okay, so that's how your answer should be like, with 3 information. State the item number, what's the index, what does the index mean. All right, so if you were to notice, we do have repeated index, and the index is not that wide ranging. One of the main reason is because when we do test administration, our test size ataupun sample size is too small. With regard to this data set, we only have 8 students. So our data, our calculation for item difficulty is based on only 8 responses. So for your test administration, if you are able to get a large number of test takers sitting for your test, for example, 30 students, then you will have more wide-ranging item difficulty indices. From the perspective of test administration and also assessment, the more number of candidates that you have, the more reliable is your item analysis and its calculation. Okay. All right. So let's move on to question number 2. Which item was the most difficult? So in order to find the most difficult which index do you need to refer to? 0 or 1? Definitely 0, because 0 means too difficult. Nobody answered the item correctly. So let's look at our table and find one item that is the closest to 0, because we don't have 0 as our answer here. Okay. So the lowest index in this table is 0.38, and there are three items with the same index: item 4, item 7, and item 9. Okay, so let's answer this question. The most difficult items in the test are items 4, 7, I think, and 9, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. 4, 7, and 9, correct. With the difficulty index of 0.38. The items are difficult because less than 40% of the students in the group managed to answer the items correctly. Okay, so it should be stated somewhere along this line. All right, so the third question is, has the teacher arranged the items accordingly in the test? How do we know that? How can we figure out from this particular table? Okay. Um, when we arrange our test item, our test should be according to increasing level of complexity. You should begin your test with the easiest items, and then you work your way up, and the final item should be the most difficult items in your test. And this is recommended because uh, the manner the items are arranged and structured assists students to build their thinking capacity. As they move along, it gets harder. So it's easier to scaffold the thinking process when they are answering the items that have been arranged in that manner. Okay? And you don't even want to surprise students with the most difficult item as the first item. You don't want to dishearten or demotivate them. I'm starting to eat my own words. You don't want to demotivate them by putting in the most difficult item. They might get the item incorrectly, or it's too difficult for them, and they won't have any more willingness and motivation to answer the rest of the test. Okay, so let's get to this. So, in order for this item to have a nicely, effectively arranged questions, item 1 should have index that is the closest to 1. And as we work our way down, the index should be lesser in terms of its value. Then that would be an effectively arranged test item. Can we observe that pattern here with these item difficulty indices? Not really, isn't it? Because the easiest item in the test are item 3 and item 6. But it is not the first item, it is the third item. And in fact, the sixth item, more than halfway through the test, somehow we stumble upon the easiest item again. So when we look at this particular difficulty indices, it does appear as if like the test fluctuates in terms of complexity. No care has been taken by the teacher to ensure that the items are arranged according to this specific manner from the easiest to the most difficult. Okay, right. So we can conclude that the items have not been arranged effectively. Okay, even though we have question 9 as the most difficult item in the test, but question 10 is not. Okay, and item 2 is even easier than item 1, and item 3 is even easier than the first two items. So now that we have established that the items in this test have not been well structured and arranged, how do we answer this particular question? Okay, you can say, no, the teacher has not, or maybe we don't focus on the teacher. The test items have not been effectively arranged based on the item difficulty table. All right, so you need to provide a bit of explanation with regard to the pattern of difficulty indices because our questions are still focusing on difficulty indices. Okay, easiest item in the task is item 3, and the most difficult item in the task is placed as item 9. Of course, you don't have to follow exactly to follow my sentences exactly. This is just a guide for you to look at how this particular question should be answered. Okay, but it's always good to start with yes or no so that we know, so that I know whether you understand or not how effective items should have been arranged. Okay. All right, so let's go to number 4. Does the task consist of an effective mix of items at varying difficulty levels? Okay, so let's look at this first and establish what kind of mix that we can consider as effective. Okay, this is referring to the proportions of items that we have in the task that represents easy item, difficult items, and moderate level of items difficulty. Okay, so if you have 10 questions, for example, then you might want to target 3 items as easy items, 3 items as difficult items, and 4 items in the middle as moderate level of difficulty. Okay, so can we observe that in this table? Has the teacher developed items according to appropriate levels of complexity? And does the teacher have an effective mix with, for example, 30%, 40%, and 30% proportion? Easy, moderate, and difficult. Do we have that here? Okay. So if we were to look at this particular table, most of the items are within the range, no, not most, all of the items are within the range of 0.38 to 0.88. Remember, I still have this. Let me just make sure that I'm within the tile. Okay, so remember this cutoff point. In order for item to be considered difficult, the item should be 0.25 or close to 0 or 0. All right. However, for this test, we don't have a single item that is falling within this range. Okay. All of the items are either of moderate level of difficulty or easy. In fact, the most difficult items in the test are actually items that are at moderate level of difficulty. They are not even the most difficult item. Okay. So this test is quite easy. It doesn't have any difficult items. With all of the items are either moderate or difficult. So how do we answer this question here? All right. No, the mix of most of the items are either of moderate Okay, so this is a sample of answer. Or if the items have been effective, if the items, if the test consists of effective mix of item, then you can say something like yes, the test consists of effective mix of item with a nice or effective proportion of easy, moderate, and difficult items. Okay, so you can explain the rest according to the way the difficulty index, the way you interpret the difficulty indices here in this table. All right. So let's move on to the final question. This is sort of like a conclusion that you need to do based on all of this information that you have presented, as well as your general conclusion of difficulty indices in this particular test based on this index. Okay, so is the test effective? There are several ways to answer these questions. It can be a clear cut yes, the test is effective, or no, the test is not effective. Or you can also answer along the line of the test is not quite effective, or the test is not that effective, or maybe you can say the test is half effective with half items, for example, if you can use that particular range to answer your item. All right, so with regard to this test, it is not that all of the items are clustered along the line of easy items or difficult items. So the test is not too easy to the students, neither that it is too difficult. It's just that it's lacking difficult items. Okay, so I would not consider this item as not effective. Sorry, I would not consider this test to be not effective. Some of the items are okay. It's just that we are lacking difficult items that can challenge the thinking of our high ability students. That's the only thing. Okay. So I would consider the test as not that effective. All right, so I have taken the time to provide the answer for number 5. So if we were to look at question 4 and question 5 seems a bit similar or almost like a repetition to item 4. But what I want you to do is to provide your conclusion based on the information that you have provided here, particularly your explanation for item 4. Okay, so for item 5, is the test effective? The test is not that effective. The high ability students would find the test to be easy as it does not have any difficult items that could challenge the learning of this group of students. Most of the items are either easy or at moderate level of difficulty. Okay, so that's it. That's your item difficulty indices as well as the interpretation for all these 5 questions based on these indices. All right, so should you have any questions and whatnot, don't hesitate to post your questions in our WhatsApp group. So have fun doing this exercise. All the best. Till then, take care and Assalamualaikum.